TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations. Shalom and good evening. This is TV7 Israel News, broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, Israel strikes at dozens of targets in Lebanon following Hezbollah's mortars fire toward Israel. Israeli Defense Minister Yisrael Katz warns Lebanon that if it fails to enforce the ceasefire, the consequences will be far-reaching. Iran blames the United States and Israel for the latest Turkish-backed onslaught in northwestern Syria. The fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon continues to hold despite repeated violations by the Iranian proxy that resulted in over a dozen precision strikes toward terror operatives and installations throughout southern Lebanon. France, which co-chairs the ceasefire's enforcement mechanism alongside the United States, has ramped up pressure on Jerusalem to refrain from operating inside Lebanese territory in response to Hezbollah's violations, in spite of the fact that the agreement's oversight mechanism to proactively enforce the ceasefire has yet to be established. And while French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot informed Israel that the mechanism is expected to be complete by week's end, Paris evidently convinced the Biden administration, which is no less eager to guarantee that the ceasefire holds, to ratchet up pressure on Israel, effectively relaying a message to Jerusalem that the IDF is enforcing the ceasefire too harshly. Moreover, in a blatant attempt to expand their pressure to the public sphere, both France and the United States claimed that Israel was violating the ceasefire by operating drones which are utilized to monitor Hezbollah's activities in Lebanon.
We hear claims that Israel is violating the ceasefire understandings in Lebanon. On the contrary, Israel is enforcing them in response to Hezbollah's violations, which demand immediate action. For example, when armed Hezbollah terrorists are identified in southern Lebanon or when they attempt to move weapons. Their presence south of the Litani River is the most basic violation of the understandings. Hezbollah terrorists must not be present south of the Litani. They must move north immediately. I want to emphasize, Israel is committed to the successful implementation of the ceasefire, but we will not accept a return to the situation as it stood on October 6, 2023. If violations occur, Israel will enforce.
Less than an hour and a half after Foreign Minister Saar pushed back on the allegations by the Macron government and the Biden administration, the Iranian proxy Hezbollah blatantly launched 2 mortar shells toward Israeli territory on Mount Dov. Consequently, during a tour of the IDF Northern Command, the Israeli military's Chief of General Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, stressed, quote, "We will respond decisively to Hezbollah's severe violations of the ceasefire and will continue to do so. We have plans and targets ready to be carried out at any given moment." Meanwhile, roughly 30 minutes after his pledge to respond decisively, the Israel Air Force conducted aerial strikes, which the IDF spokesperson's unit said struck Hezbollah terror operatives, dozens of launchers, and terrorist infrastructure throughout Lebanon. In its statement, the IDF further stressed its preparedness, quote, "to continue operating wherever necessary and will continue to operate to defend Israeli civilians." Subsequently, early in the morning, Israeli Defense Minister Yisrael Katz toured Israel's Northern Command, during the course of which he relayed a clear message to all relevant parties.
The
main message I came to say here, our policy, together with the IDF, is clear and unequivocal. We will act with all our might to enforce all the understandings of the ceasefire agreement, and we will have a maximum response and zero tolerance. Yesterday was the first test, firing at Mount Dov as if it were outside the normal debate or subject to interpretation. As far as we are concerned, it is not subject to any interpretation. We responded with force, and that is exactly what we will do, and we will not allow Hezbollah to return to the old methods that were in place, like the tent that was set up and not attacked. We are not in those places at all. Everything that was in the past will not be hence onward.
Jerusalem's top defense official continued by relaying a message to the Lebanese government as well.
This is a message to the Lebanese government that it needs to make a decision to authorize the Lebanese army to enforce their part of the agreement, to keep Hezbollah away beyond the Litani River, and to dismantle all the infrastructure. Any infrastructure to dismantle, terrorist infrastructure, weapons, and all the other things, they need to authorize the Lebanese army. And the Lebanese army, under American and other supervision, needs to do it. If they don't do that and this whole agreement will collapse, then the reality will be very clear. First of all, if we return to war, we will act with force, we will go deeper, and the most important thing they need to know is that there will be no more exemptions for the state of Lebanon. If up until now we separated the state of Lebanon from Hezbollah and between the whole of Beirut and the Dia neighborhood that suffered very severe blows, that will no longer be the case.
Meanwhile, in Washington, U.S. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller addressed the fragility of the ceasefire between Israel and the Iranian proxy Hezbollah.
So what we have seen since the ceasefire went into effect is it being successful. Broadly speaking, it has been successful in stopping the fighting and getting us on a path where we are not seeing the just daily loss of life that we had seen for 2 months prior. Now, with respect to violations or potential violations of the ceasefire, we set a mechanism up to look into this very question, where the United States, along with France, will engage with the Israeli military, will engage with the Lebanese military to look at potential violations. We obviously anticipated that there might be violations because anytime, or nearly any time, you have a ceasefire of this nature, you have either claimed violations of the ceasefire, especially in the opening weeks when things are very fragile, or you have real violations of a ceasefire. So what we are doing is engaging through this mechanism to look at all of these reports of violations of the ceasefire and deal with them through the channels that the mechanism set up, and that's what we'll do over the coming days.
Miller went on to address the latest hostilities in Syria amid an ongoing push by the Turkish-backed Islamist forces in the western countryside of Aleppo Governorate, despite growing opposition by the Assad regime, backed by Russian air support and Iranian ground forces. Meanwhile, the leader of the Syrian opposition groups, which has coordinated the latest onslaught with the al-Qaeda affiliate, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, acknowledged that they had waited for the war in Lebanon to end as to avoid connecting between the Israel-Iran conflict to the conflict in Syria.
They were waiting until it's finished because it was supposed to happen before that. But the war on Gaza, which happened, it delayed it. Then the war in Lebanon, it delayed it. They felt that it wouldn't look good having the war going in Lebanon and in the same time they are fighting this war in Syria. They don't want to have both of them connected.
Subsequently, in a press briefing, the Syrian opposition leader asserted that the war in Syria would continue until the Assad regime commits to negotiate.
I assure you that we will continue this time, and we won't stop fighting until one of two things happens. Either this regime commits to the entire political process to implement the UN Security Council Resolution 2254 until we reach a political transition.
Meanwhile, in Turkey, Ankara's top diplomat, following a meeting with his Iranian counterpart, stressed the need for dialogue to emerge out of the current state of war.
Son gelişmeler Şam'ın kendi halkıyla ve meşru
The latest developments show once again that Damascus needs to reach an agreement with his own people and opposition.
bu yönde gereken tüm
Turkey is ready to make all contributions needed in this regard.
bundan sonra bütün
What all the regional actors and other actors need to do is to open the dialogue channels between the regime and the opposition, find a realistic area for a solution, and to prevent more blood, tears, and destruction.
ve yıkımın önlenmesi.
While standing next to the Turkish foreign minister, whose country is known to be the mastermind of the latest onslaught in northwestern Syria, unabashedly claimed that the United States and Israel were the ones behind the attack, irrespective of the fact that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is labeled a foreign terrorist organization by both countries.
خیلی خوشحالم که
According to the information we obtained, the terrorist organizations operating in Syria are in close relation and coordination with America and the Zionist regime. These groups have been encouraged to create an environment of insecurity in Syria with the aim of distracting from the Zionist regime's crimes in Palestine and Lebanon and to make up for their failure against the resistance.
در سوریه نمودند.
Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. I would like to encourage you, pray for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. Moreover, if you're blessed by our productions, which are exclusively donation-based and as such broadcast free of charge, please consider making a donation. You can do so via our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. I'm Jonathan Hessen, wishing you an Erev Mevorach, and God willing, we will see you during our next update. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.